Well, as we begin, I have some numbers to share with you. Currently, it is estimated that the number of Christians in the world today is at just over 2.5 billion. 2.5 billion. The number of existing congregations in the world today, and I'm speaking of congregations in the traditional sense, there are actually many more not in the traditional sense, but ones that meet like us in a church building that's dedicated for the purpose of worship. There are 37 million. 37 million. Now think about those numbers for a moment. 2.5 billion Christians and 37 million active church buildings. That's a lot of hymnals. That's also a lot of Sunday bulletins, annual reports, flowers and candles, Sunday school crayons. Of course, it gets complicated because those churches are not all exactly the same. Have any of you ever visited a church that's different from the one you belong to? Yeah. Most of us have. Speaking for myself, I have been to an Assembly of God church in North Carolina where at least half the congregation spoke in tongues. I have also been to a Roman Catholic church in New Jersey where the priest gave communion even to we Protestants who were visiting that Sunday because he believed that all believers in Jesus Christ should be one and are one. I thought that was huge, personally. I've been to a gigantic church in Texas that didn't have any windows. That's handy if you have a tornado. I've worshiped in churches in Hungary that were hundreds of years old. I've attended a Christian church on the island of Okinawa, just south of mainland Japan, and the congregants there were all Okinawan people. I've even attended a makeshift church set up in a tent in the Mojave Desert. Now, you may be surprised to hear me say this, but just after I got through saying that these churches are not all the same, they actually are deep down inside. I'm reminded of what my dad used to say. He said it's the same thing, only different. And that is because they each make up the same body of Christ. Now, there are a variety of churches, and we've been in a wide variety of churches, and we may prefer our own understated, mainline Protestant version of the faith, but one thing needs to be pointed out, and that is actual believers in Jesus Christ are one church, regardless of what the sign on the building says. Now, let's say today that you were to go, or sometime this week, you were to go to an ice cream parlor. Say you were going to go to Baskin-Robbins or Dairy Queen or one of these little independent shops, and you see all the different varieties of ice cream. Now, I ask you, which one is the real ice cream? That's a silly question, right? I mean, many different colors and flavors, but underneath the basic substance is essentially the same. And this is the way it is with the Church of Jesus Christ. Believers in Illinois and believers in Hungary and believers in Africa each have their own unique flavor, but it is still, as it says in Ephesians 4, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. Immediately after Jesus had the Last Supper with his disciples, and before they left that upper room, he offered up a prayer. We heard it just moments ago. And today we're looking at it's going to be brief, one particular thing that he stated in that whole prayer. It's in verse 21. He says, that they may all be one. In a previous church that I served, I preached on this very same text. And I remember one day somebody came up to me after the service and they said, did Jesus quote from our UCC motto? And I said, no, it's the other way around. Our UCC motto has quoted from the words of Jesus, and the motto of our United Church of Christ is that they may all be one. It was and is the desire of Jesus that his followers would be united as one body. Now, obviously, we haven't been, but that has been Christ's desire nonetheless. One of the Protestant reformers, John Calvin, wrote in his Institutes that unless all members are united with one another under Christ, here's what he says, and I quote, "No hope of future inheritance remains to us," unquote. I don't know exactly what Calvin meant by future inheritance, but one thing is clear, and that is that no good thing can come from disunity. There's a story that really touched my heart this week, and it comes from another church that was having vacation Bible school. And the teacher got along through the class, and about an hour before the regular dismissal time, an incident happened that she says she'll never forget. The class was interrupted when a new student was brought in, and it was a little boy who had one arm missing. And since the class was almost over, she had no opportunity to learn any of the details of what caused this, the boy's circumstances. And she was also concerned that, because they were young children in the class, that the other students would say something about his handicap and embarrass him. And there was just no time, and there wasn't really an appropriate moment that she could caution the class about this. And so she just kind of had to adjust on the fly and make do. Anyway, as the class time came to a close, she began to relax. And at the end of every class session, she had the students do a little exercise. And we've all done this before. And she says, "Okay, let's all make our churches." So this is the church, and this is the steeple. Open the doors, and there are the people. And she caught herself in that moment. The very thing she had hoped that the kids in the class wouldn't do, she had done. And it was just a terrible moment for her of embarrassed silence. Until one little girl who sat next to that boy with the arm missing, she took her left hand and put it over to his right hand and said, "Come on, Davy, let's make the church together." Every person in every church, you and me and every folks down the street, we're just like that little boy with an arm missing. You see, we're incomplete. Parts are missing from us as well. But we are also called to be like that little girl, to take on her heart and her mind and to say, let's make the church together. That's your call, and it's my call as well. Amen.